Why would you read the private journal of a long-dead Roman emperor? A man who buried his children, endured plague and war, and ruled an empire while quietly waging another war within, against his own impulses, fears, and vanities. Why turn to a text never meant to be published, scribbled in Greek, by candlelight, in the front lines of history? Because Meditations isn't just a book. It's a mirror, not a polished one, but the kind that shows you who you truly are and who you could become. Marcus Aurelius never intended to be your mentor. He was simply trying to survive, with dignity, with reason, with virtue. He didn't write for you, but perhaps that's why his words reach you more deeply than those who do. In a world of noise, posturing, and curated perfection, Meditations is startling in its honesty. A man of unimaginable power reminding himself daily to stay humble, to forgive, to accept, to endure. If you've ever felt lost, overwhelmed, resentful, or simply tired of being tossed around by life, this book won't give you all the answers, but it will give you better questions. In this journey, we'll explore why this dusty, ancient notebook might just be the most powerful companion you never knew you needed, and how it might quietly, steadily, transform the way you live. So stay with me, because by the end, you won't just want to read Meditations. You want to live it. There are books you read to learn, and then there are books that read you. Meditations belongs to the latter. It isn't a polished essay, a lecture, or even a philosophical treatise. It's something far rarer, raw thought, caught in the act of becoming wisdom. Imagine this: the most powerful man in the world, surrounded by luxury, flattery, and command, sits alone in a tent, at the edge of an empire, writing to no one but himself. He's not performing. He's not persuading. He's not even explaining. He's reminding himself not to be seduced by power, not to be dyed purple by the cloak of the emperor, to remain a man first and an emperor second. In a world obsessed with image, Marcus Aurelius was doing something radical. He was peeling it all away, stripping off the titles, the masks, the noise. And what's left is a man, a soul, a voice whispering across 2 millennia, stay humble. Do what's right. Endure what you must. It's perhaps the only document in human history where supreme power meets supreme self-doubt, where we see not a ruler dictating to others, but a student of life writing quietly to himself, fighting not to conquer nations, but to conquer ego, anger, distraction, and despair. That's why this book is so powerful. Because when you read it, you're not being talked down to. You're being invited in. Invited to walk beside someone who had every reason to lose himself, but chose, day after day, thought after thought, to remain whole. And maybe, just maybe, so can you. Meditations does not read like Plato or Aristotle. There are no chapters, no arguments to win, no audience to impress. Just fragments, brief, blunt, sometimes repetitive. And that is exactly what makes it matter. Because real wisdom, the kind we reach for in the dark moments of life, is not found in essays or lectures. It's found in reminders. That's what Meditations is, a collection of reminders. To stay calm, to be fair, to focus only on what is within your control, to not let the world shake your soul loose. Marcus wasn't writing to explain Stoicism to others. He was writing to survive it himself. Each line is like a whispered mantra, a hand on the shoulder, a breath drawn deep before stepping into battle, not with armies, but with the self. And yes, it repeats. But don't we all repeat the things we most need to hear? I must not let anger win today. I must remember that fame fades. I must act with justice, even if no one sees it. What we're witnessing in these pages is not performance, but practice. The slow, deliberate strengthening of a soul under siege. Think of it like a journal of inner resistance. A soldier king, facing not only enemies on the front lines, but temptations within, pride, despair, distraction. And with each page, Marcus is building his fortress, not of stone, but of clarity. of virtue, of peace. You don't read Meditations to admire its style. You read it because somewhere in those scribbled notes, you begin to hear yourself. Before Marcus Aurelius ever tells you how to live, he tells you who taught him how to live. The first book of Meditations, just 2,000 words or so, is nothing but an inventory of gratitude. No preaching, no commands, just memory and reverence. He writes of his grandfather, who showed him serenity and courtesy, of his father, who modeled strength without arrogance, of his mother, who gave him compassion and generosity, his teachers, who taught him to think clearly and live simply, even the gods, who he says place the right people in his life at the right time. Before the emperor steps onto the battlefield of life, he bows. And in that bow, he gives us one of the most powerful reminders. We are not self-made. We are mosaic souls, assembled from those who came before us. Marcus could have started Meditations with power, with philosophy, with grand declarations. Instead, he begins with thanks. He knew that the foundation of strength is not pride, but humility. That to live well, you must first remember well. And what he remembers, what he honors, is not status or reputation, but values. Patience, discipline, kindness, reason. He doesn't list their wealth or victories. He lists their character. In a world that teaches us to showcase our independence, Marcus turns inward and says, I owe who I am to the people who helped shape me. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And it sets the tone for the entire book. Because if a man who ruled over tens of millions could still pause to thank his philosophy teacher for introducing him to Epictetus, then maybe we too should think more often about who we're becoming and who helped us get here. Perhaps that's what we're missing in the rush of modern life. We're quick to chase progress, but slow to reflect on influence. We want growth, but without roots. But growth without roots is instability. So Marcus takes the time. He writes it down. He names them all. And with each name, each lesson, each moment of remembrance, he grows more grounded, more human, more real. He shows us that the path to greatness begins in gratitude. And that legacy isn't just what you leave behind. It's what you carry forward, quietly, humbly, through the way you live. Some critics call Meditations repetitive. They're right, but what they miss is that this isn't a bug. It's the feature, because Meditations isn't a performance. It's a practice. You see, Marcus wasn't writing to impress the world. He was writing to keep himself from becoming what the world wanted him to be. He was reminding himself, day after day, line after line, that virtue isn't something you declare once and then live by forever. It's something you choose and then choose again, and again, and again. We don't become calm by reading about calmness once. We become calm by confronting chaos and choosing to return, again, to stillness. Just like you don't go to the gym once and expect to be strong for life. You don't remind yourself to be kind or just or resilient once and expect those virtues to stick. Repetition is how habits are formed. And Marcus knew this long before neuroscience ever did. He repeats because he needs to remember. He needs to remember that power corrupts, that anger is a trap, that most things are outside his control, that death is coming, that the opinions of others are fleeting, that virtue is the only thing that truly belongs to us. This is not redundancy. This is reinforcement. When Marcus writes, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. He's not being dramatic. He's being deliberate. He's pressing the truth deeper into his soul, burning it in, so that when the storm comes, he won't forget. Because under pressure, we don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. Meditations is that training. And every repeated line is another layer of armor. We live in a culture addicted to novelty, always looking for the next insight, the next hack, the next truth. But Marcus knew what most people never figure out. It's not about finding more truth. It's about living the truths we already know. So he wrote them down. Then he wrote them again. Not to teach the world, but to remind himself who he was fighting to become. And in doing that, he leaves behind a trail for us to follow. Because maybe you too need to hear the same thing again today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. Some books introduce you to an idea. Meditations introduces you to a way of living. Marcus never called himself a Stoic. He probably would have just said, "I'm trying to be a philosopher." Not in the academic sense, but in the ancient one, a lover of wisdom, someone shaping the soul like a sculptor shapes stone. In that way, Meditations is less a book and more a doorway. A doorway into a philosophy already centuries old when Marcus picked up Epictetus and began walking its path. A philosophy forged in the fire of real life, slavery, exile, war, death, not in university halls, but in the unpredictability of the human condition. And it still speaks because we're still human. Stoicism, at its core, is painfully practical. It asks one thing of you: to live with virtue, to choose courage when fear is easier, to practice self-restraint when indulgence calls, to act with justice even when no one's watching, to pursue wisdom, especially when ignorance feels more comfortable. And Marcus comes back to these again and again because he wasn't there yet. He was wrestling, struggling, becoming. That's why Meditations is so powerful, not because it preaches perfection, but because it invites us into the process. He reminds himself daily, do the right thing, whether you're tired or rested, praised or hated. Accept what's outside your control. Turn every obstacle into fuel. It's not abstract, it's actionable, and it's spiritual too. The French scholar Pierre Hadot called it spiritual combat, a daily reckoning between who we are and who we want to be. Marcus wasn't seeking to transcend life. He was trying to master living. He didn't run from hardship. He let it shape him. And he turned to Stoicism not to sound wise, but to survive, to breathe, to stay calm amidst chaos, to keep his humanity when power threatened to strip it away. And here's the beauty. You don't need to be emperor to need what he needed. You just need to be human. Whatever role you play, parent, builder, soldier, student, Stoicism meets you there, right where you are. No role is better suited to philosophy than the one you're living right now. You just have to walk through the door. There are truths we hear once and never forget. And then there are truths we must repeat every day, every hour, because life has a way of making us forget them. Marcus Aurelius returned to 3 such truths over and over again in Meditations, not because he didn't understand them, but because understanding isn't enough. You have to embody them. Let's walk through them, these pillars that held him steady as the world around him swayed and burned. 1. Do the right thing, no matter what. Just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. Not whether people praise you. Not whether you succeed. Not whether it feels good. You do the right thing because it is right. This wasn't moral posturing for Marcus. It was survival. As emperor, he could do almost anything and get away with it. But he chose discipline over indulgence, justice over vengeance, moderation over excess. That's not weakness. That's mastery. He writes, cold or warm, honored or despised, tired or well-rested, just that you do the right thing. Can you say the same? Do you hold your principles in calm weather, but abandon them in the storm? Marcus reminds us, virtue isn't situational. 2. Accept what you cannot control. One of the most hauntingly powerful ideas in all of Stoicism. Some things are up to us. Some things are not. Marcus knew this deeply. He lived through plague, political betrayal, family grief, endless war. He didn't waste time asking, why me? Instead, he asked, what now? He quotes Epictetus, the art of acquiescence, not resignation, acceptance, the serene clarity of knowing where your influence ends and where surrender must begin. You can't control other people. You can't control the past. You can't control how history will remember you, but you can control your character. You can choose your response. You can hold your integrity, and that is enough. 3. Turn obstacles into opportunities. The Stoics believe that adversity is not the enemy. It's the arena. Every difficulty is a disguised invitation to practice the very virtues life demands from us. As Marcus puts it, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. You don't avoid the fire. You step into it, because that's where strength is forged. You're betrayed? Be patient. You fail? Be resilient. You're hurt? Be kind anyway. To the Stoics, life isn't happening to you. It's happening for you, to shape you into something stronger, wiser, braver. Marcus believed this with every fiber of his being, that every burden was a forge, every obstacle a teacher. These three truths are not mere ideas. They're practices. They are quite literally the way of life Marcus used to survive and to stay whole. He didn't always succeed, but every time he stumbled, he returned to these principles. He wrote them down, repeated them, embedded them into the fabric of his mind. And so must we, because we don't need more knowledge. We need better reminders. People hear the word philosophy, and they imagine something distant. Old men in robes, ivory towers, theoretical debates that have nothing to do with real life. But Stoicism? Stoicism is as close as your next breath, as urgent as your next decision, as relevant as whatever crisis you're facing this very moment. Because Stoicism isn't for the few, it's for you. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. He ruled the Roman Empire, yes, but he never once said, "This is only for emperors." In fact, he said the opposite. "No role," he wrote, "is so well suited to philosophy as the one you're in right now." Think about that. Whether you're a parent trying to raise good kids in a chaotic world, a nurse on your fourth night shift, a college student crushed by doubt, or a business owner facing impossible choices, Stoicism meets you there. It doesn't care about your job title, your bank balance, your degree. It cares about your soul and how you train it. Are you courageous when it counts? Can you be kind when it's hard? Do you act with justice even when no one sees? Do you focus on what you can control and release what you can't? That's Stoicism. Not theory, not talk, practice. That's why Meditations has been carried into battle by generals, kept in purses by CEOs, read on buses by struggling teenagers, and folded into the pockets of Olympic athletes, special forces operators, and recovering addicts. It's not a relic, it's a tool. And if you let it, it can be your tool. Because Stoicism doesn't say, "Come back when your life is easier." It says, "Let's begin now, right here, in this mess." You don't need to retreat to a mountain. You don't need perfect silence or perfect circumstances. You need only one thing, the willingness to take yourself seriously, to try, really try to be a better human being. Not someday, but today. That's why meditation still works, because it speaks to anyone brave enough to pick it up and say, "Let me try." If you've ever felt alone in your search for meaning, you're not, because for nearly 2,000 years, people from every walk of life have turned to meditations, and not because it was trendy, but because it worked. When Theodore Roosevelt led an expedition down the deadly river of doubt in the Amazon, he took only a few books. Meditations was one of them. When General James Mattis deployed for 4 decades in the U.S. Marine Corps, war zones, diplomatic standoffs, endless uncertainty, he carried Meditations in his rucksack, like armor for the soul. Frederick the Great rode into battle with it in his saddlebag. Ariana Huffington? She keeps a quote from Marcus laminated in her purse. J.K. Rowling has read it and recommended it. John Stuart Mill, John Steinbeck, Beatrice Webb, Ambrose Bierce. The list doesn't stop. It spans East and West, war and peace, politics and poetry. But here's what's more striking than the names. It's what they all found in Meditations. Clarity, grounding, strength. Not the kind of strength that dominates others, but the strength to dominate yourself. To get out of bed when the world feels heavy. to stay kind when bitterness is easier, to face your own flaws without flinching. This isn't coincidence. It's design. Meditations was built for the long game, not for the moment, but for the lifetime. And when you read it, you're stepping into a quiet, unbroken lineage, not of philosophers talking to the masses, but of people flawed, afraid, hopeful, passing this little black book from hand to hand, across generations, across languages, across continents. You might read it in a quiet apartment, in the stillness before dawn. Someone else read it in a muddy trench in 1916. Someone else on a train to a job they hate. Someone else before walking into a courtroom or an operating room or a battlefield. Same book, same lines, and yet something new every time. That's the beauty of it. You're not reading Meditations for the sake of history. You're reading it to become someone worth remembering. It's easy to look back at Marcus Aurelius and see the robes, the statues, the titles. But strip all of that away, and what are you left with? A man, overwhelmed, grieving, exhausted. A man who buried children, who ruled through famine, who endured a plague that killed millions, who went to war not once, but repeatedly, often against forces inside his own empire. A man whose own body betrayed him, racked with illness and pain. This was not a golden life. It was a storm. And yet, through all of it, he kept showing up. Not just as emperor, but as a student of philosophy. Not just for his empire, but for his own soul. That's what makes Meditations so powerful. Because it isn't theory written from comfort. It's a journal carved out in the trenches of adversity. Marcus wasn't writing about how to thrive when things were easy. He was writing to survive when things were falling apart. And not just survive, but to remain decent, to remain thoughtful, to remain virtuous, even when the world around him gave him every excuse to stop caring. He writes not with the confidence of someone who has figured it all out, but with the humility of someone who knows the battle is never over. Every page of Meditations is a quiet rebellion against bitterness, against cynicism, against the voice that says, "Why keep trying?" Because that's the real war Marcus was fighting. Not against barbarians, not against disease, but against the erosion of his own character. And he fought it one sentence at a time. That's why the book matters. That's why it endures. Because when life punches you in the gut, harder than you thought possible, Marcus reminds you, you still get to choose how you respond. You can still show up with courage. You can still act with compassion. You can still cling to your integrity like a lifeline in a storm. And maybe like Marcus, you don't win every day. But the point is to keep coming back to the page, to keep turning inward, searching, sharpening, becoming. That's what Meditations is. Not a monument to perfection, but a record of someone who refused to be conquered by circumstance. And that's someone worth listening to. Some books offer insight. Meditations offers instructions for the soul. Not abstract theories, not vague ideals, but clear, sharp, unforgettable lines. Lines that feel like they were written for you, right now, in the thick of your life. At 19 years old, I opened Meditations for the first time. I thought I was going to read something noble and distant. Instead, it felt like I was reading my own thoughts, spoken back to me by someone who had lived 1,000 years longer than I had. Marcus writes, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being, not as emperor, not as philosopher, as a human." That line hit me like a punch to the chest. Because haven't we all felt it? That heaviness, that desire to stay hidden under the covers, that moment when ease calls louder than duty. And Marcus answers it, not with judgment, but with clarity. He asks, is this what you were created for? To feel nice? Or to act and experience? It's not just a wake-up call. It's a mission statement. And then there's this one, which he places right at the start of book 2. When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He's not being pessimistic. He's being prepared. Because what lands hardest is what catches us off guard. But Marcus doesn't stop at the warning. He follows it with purpose. But they can't hurt me. I can't hate them. We were born to work together, like hands or feet or the rows of teeth. To obstruct each other is unnatural. It's not enough to know that people will disappoint you. You have to train yourself not to become like them. That's what Marcus does again and again. He reminds himself, don't get angry. Don't play the victim. Don't lose yourself because of someone else's behavior. Or this, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. That line, so simple, so dangerous, can change your entire life if you let it, because it reveals what the Stoics knew. That suffering is not always in what happens, but in how we interpret what happens. Over and over, Marcus returns to this, that you are not your thoughts, that you are not what others think, that you are not defined by circumstance, but by response. Meditations is full of lines like this, lines that go beyond wisdom and become tools, mental weapons, for navigating modern life. Lines that stay with you like scars or like armor. And the more you read them, the more you repeat them, the more you become them. Not overnight, but slowly, patiently. One sentence, one reminder, one breath at a time. There are books you finish and forget. Then there are books that finish you, that leave a mark so deep you come back to them not out of duty, but because something in you needs to return. Meditations is one of those books. The first time I read it, I was in college. I sat at a table, paperback in hand, and felt like I had been hit by something ancient and unmistakably real. It wasn't just what Marcus said. It was how it felt, like he was sitting across from me, whispering truths I wasn't yet ready to hear, but couldn't ignore. And then I read it again, and again. Each time, something new surfaced. Not because the book changed, but because I did. What didn't resonate at 19 suddenly felt essential at 28. What I skimmed past in good times hit differently in heartbreak. What I misunderstood when things were calm revealed its depth when life got chaotic. That's the kind of book Meditations is. You don't outgrow it. You grow into it. Each reread is a mirror. Each page reflects not just Marcus's struggle, but your own. And that's why this book has been read not once, but dozens, even hundreds, of times by some of the greatest minds in history. Generals took it into battle. Writers kept it by their beds. Philosophers underlined and dog-eared it to death. There's a reason General Mattis took it with him across 40 years of war. Because this isn't a book you study. It's a book you live with. And if you let it, it becomes more than words on a page. It becomes ritual, compass, anchor. It becomes the hand you reach for when the world doesn't make sense. The voice you need when your own feels shaky. The silence that steadies you when your mind is too loud. So don't just read Meditations. Let it read you, and return to it again and again, not to finish it, but to keep beginning. The real war, Marcus Aurelius knew, was never out there. It wasn't the barbarians at the gates. It wasn't the crumbling empire, the sickness in his body, or the betrayals around him. The real war was in here. The swirling chaos of thought, fear, judgment, anger, anxiety. And if you read Meditations carefully, you'll notice something. He's not just talking about how to live in the world. He's trying to master the world inside. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's not just poetic. It's a lifeline for every person who's ever felt trapped by their own thoughts. And Marcus returns to this idea over and over, because he knew how easy it was to drown in the stories we tell ourselves. He writes about anxiety, but he doesn't name it like a condition. He names it like a choice. He reminds himself, the anxiety is not out there. I am the source of it. That's a hard truth, but it's a liberating one. Because if the storm is in your perception, then you can also calm it. He doesn't try to silence the inner noise by force. He lets it pass, like clouds over a still lake. Like a skilled Buddhist, Marcus practices non-attachment, not to pleasure or pain, not even to his own mind. You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you. How often do we take an event, an insult, a delay, a mistake, and turn it into a narrative of shame or anger? Marcus knew this tendency. He fought it daily, and Meditations was his battleground. Each line is an act of mental jiu-jitsu, not to dominate others, but to stay free from himself. Free from the version of him that clings, overreacts, imagines, assumes. This is cognitive clarity centuries before cognitive behavioral therapy had a name. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about seeing through it, about stepping back from the feeling long enough to ask, is this true? Or is this just a thought I believed without questioning? Marcus shows us how to find space between stimulus and response, between thought and identity, between life and the story we attach to it. That space, however small, is freedom. And in that freedom, we find the strength to choose again, to rise above what's fleeting, to return to what's essential, to act not from fear, but from clarity. That's the Stoic path. That's what Marcus was walking. And if we choose it, we walk it with him. What do you hold on to when everything else can be taken away? Your health? It fades. Your wealth? It's fragile. Your reputation? It rises and falls with whispers. But virtue? Virtue is untouchable. And for Marcus Aurelius, it was the only thing worth building a life around. In Meditations, he doesn't chase legacy. He doesn't plead for peace or comfort or applause. He returns again and again to one question. What does it mean to be good? Not in theory, not in abstract, in action. To him, the answer was fourfold: courage, temperance, justice, wisdom. The four cardinal virtues, not just ideals, but imperatives. If you find anything in life better than justice, self-control, courage, and wisdom, he writes, it must be an extraordinary thing indeed. But Marcus never did, because he understood something most people spend their whole lives missing, that to live with virtue is to live with peace. Not a shallow peace, free of conflict or hardship, but a deep, enduring one, the kind that comes from knowing you acted rightly, even when no one was watching. That's why Meditations doesn't just read like philosophy. It reads like a manual for becoming more fully yourself. And the message is clear. Who you are is not what happens to you. Who you are is how you respond. You lost the job. How did you handle it? Someone lied to you. How did you answer? You were given power. Did you use it to serve or to serve yourself? These are the tests. And Marcus passed, not perfectly but earnestly. He was trying, every day, trying to return to the virtues like a pilot corrects course midair, like a soldier sharpening his blade after every battle. He knew he would never arrive at perfection, but he also knew you don't have to be perfect to be good. You just have to keep returning to the work, to the effort, to the virtues. That's why Meditations isn't just ancient wisdom, it's living guidance. Because no matter who you are, CEO, janitor, soldier, teacher, mother, son, this is your opportunity too. To be strong, to be steady, to be just, courageous, self-disciplined, and wise. Not someday, today. You don't need to be a philosopher to read Meditations. You just need to be someone who's lived long enough to know that life doesn't play fair, and wise enough to want to respond to it better. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to impress. He wrote to remind himself. And somehow across 2,000 years, he ends up reminding us too. So if this video stirred something in you, a quiet yes beneath the noise of modern life, a longing for more stillness, more strength, more substance, don't let it pass. Pick up the book, open to any page, and let it speak to the part of you that's ready to grow. And if this journey into Stoicism resonated with you, then this channel, this space we're building, is for you. We explore more than quotes. We dive into the ideas, the struggles, the moments that shape character. So if you haven't already, subscribe to join a community of thoughtful, resilient souls walking the same path. Like this video if it helped you pause. Share it with someone who's been carrying too much for too long. And in the comments, tell me, what's one line from Marcus that you needed to hear today? Remember, philosophy only matters when it's lived. So live it, and I'll see you in the next one.